Hello friends, my name's TheRealEmile and welcome back to some more Forza Top Gear laps. Today we are going to be racing some supercars around our Top Gear test track. We haven't had too many supercars go round, so I figured this would be a good point to throw some round and get some pretty decent lap times with them. The current leader of our lap board is an Real Emile V8, however I don't think any of these cars are particularly aiming for that today. We're sort of looking for times between 117s and 120s. The first car to go around today was the Ferrari 458 Italia. This car has 562 horsepower and weighs 3,274 pounds. Now the 458 in my opinion isn't my favourite Ferrari in the world. I don't actually really like this car, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not a huge fan of the styling of it. I think it looks a little weird and wonky in places to me. Obviously, I appreciate that some people really like this car, but for me, I'm not a huge fan of it. I'm also not a fan of the way this thing drives. It feels very light and very twitchy, and it's always on edge. That's basically the best way to describe it. It doesn't really feel like there's any grip in this car, at least from my experiences. I wouldn't say it's quite as bad as some of the track cars we had last time. Certainly this isn't as bad as the Caterham, but it still feels very like it wants to go sideways all of the time. Now on this lap I managed to compose it a lot. There's a cone from earlier which I managed to knock perfectly into place. But yeah, on the first season of the Top Gear laps, this car set a pretty appalling lap time, so it's kind of here today to sort of redeem itself, I guess, and hopefully it should get a faster lap time than it did last time. Next up we have a McLaren MP4-12C. This has 591 horsepower and weighs 3,031 pounds. And yes, I know, I had a blue Ferrari and I've got a red McLaren. Yeah. Anyway, the MP4-12C, at least in my opinion, is much better than the 458. I prefer the way this thing looks. Also in real life, technically it is better than a 458. The brakes are slightly better, handling slightly better, so on and so forth. On the actual track, this car drives like the 458 should. This car feels a lot more punted. Now don't get me wrong, this is still a very active on edge car. You can get this thing sideways very easily, but it feels so much more composed than the 458 Italia, and I like driving this around a lot more. Now around the actual Top Gear track, this car is ridiculously quick. This thing, I think he got a 1:16.2, which is 3 seconds faster than the 458 Italia did in real life, so yeah, this car is ridiculously quick, and you can't really feel that when you're in the car. It doesn't feel that quick. It only feels the tiniest bit faster than the 458, a tiny bit better on the brakes and so on and so forth. But all them tiny differences seem to come together to make one huge difference, and this car is so much better to drive than the 458 Italia. Next up we have an Audi R8 V10 Plus. This has 542 horsepower and weighs 3,682 pounds. The best way to describe how the Audi R8 drives is it's kind of like a four-wheel drive 458 Italia. This thing does go sideways quite a lot. It's a very slidey car, this one. So I didn't particularly like it very much. I'm not a huge fan of this car anyway. I feel the R8 is one of those cars people buy when they want a cheap supercar and want to advertise to the world that, hey, I bought the cheapest supercar on the lot because I can't afford the Ferraris and the McLarens and so on and so forth. Now that being said, this car is actually quite cheap in game. The Ferrari is 270,000 credits, I believe, and the McLaren is 240,000. This is 150,000 credits. So, yeah, this is quite a bit cheaper than those cars. So, I mean, I guess the R8 with a bit of tuning, as in like 90 grand's worth of tuning, you could probably make this thing much faster than those two cars. But from stock, I'm not a huge fan of this thing, unfortunately. It's also slower because it weighs more and has less power than the 458, so yeah, this is probably the weakest car we have here today in my opinion. Not a huge fan of this one. Now another four-wheel drive supercar, and if you're speaking of cheap, you want one of these. This is a Nissan GTR Black, 542 horsepower like the Audi, and it weighs 3,887 pounds, which is a bit heavier than the Audi. Now the GTR is the internet's favourite car, so obviously those figures are wrong. This actually produces 7 million horsepower and weighs nothing. It's a feather. But anyway, getting serious, the GTR, in my opinion, is better than the Audi R8. This thing is 40,000 credits. And the GTR in real life is a huge track monster. This thing is very, very quick. I believe it's one of the quickest cars around the Nürburgring. However, in Forza, I'm not sure if they've modelled this car wrong or if it's genuinely like this when it's not set up in race mode and track mode and so on and so forth. This car's quite understeery, which is something you definitely do notice around a track like this with some tight corners and so on and so forth. Now, the GTR was better to drive than the Audi R8 and the 458 Italia. It barely goes sideways, this thing. It's very, very nice to drive. Straight line speed was a bit of an issue in this car. Obviously, it's a little bit heavier than the Audi. I'm not sure if it was that much slower than the Audi, to be perfectly honest with you. But, yeah, not quite as quick as some of the cars we've had here today. But quick cars, this tops them all. This is the Lamborghini Aventador. This has 700 horsepower and weighs 3,472 pounds. This is probably my favourite modern supercar. I absolutely adore the Lamborghini Aventador. This thing looks absolutely superb. And it's extremely quick around here. On the first season of Top Gear Laps, this blew pretty much every other supercar we had around out of the water. And just looking at this lap, you can see why. It has four-wheel drive, it has lots of power, which means it's loads of straight line speed. The brakes feel really good. And unlike big Lamborghinis of the past, big Lamborghinis usually have noticeable amounts of understeer. The Aventador, no. It really, if this does have understeer, which it probably does when you really push it, you don't feel it at all in the Aventador, which is really good. This car is superb to drive. Now, because we seem to be speaking about price for all these, yes, this thing is ridiculously expensive. It's like 400,000 credits, I think. But over them cars, it's worth it. If I had to pick any car here today, it would either be this or the next car that's coming up that I would probably have as a car to actually drive and race around in. Yeah, I absolutely adore the Aventador, and it was brilliant. Next up, speaking of awesome cars, we have a Maserati MC12. This has 623 horsepower and weighs 3,142 pounds. Now, in the first episode of this, we had a Ferrari Enzo go around. This is basically the same thing as a Ferrari Enzo, just it's a bit down on power and weighs a bit more. However, this car drives beautifully. If you've never driven the MC12 in Forza 5, I highly recommend this car. It's brilliant. The brakes are fantastic. The handling is superb. Straight line speed's pretty good in this car. Obviously, you know, it's not quite as quick as the Aventador, or even, I'd say the McLaren might be even a bit quicker than this car. But it's still very fast. It's very, very nice to drive. I adored this thing around here. I really did. Yeah, this is very costly as well. It was a DLC car, so some people would have got this for free. If you were one of the lucky people to get this for free, if you have the DLC, seriously, go drive this car. It is superb. Even if you've got Forza 4, go drive it on there, because it's also superb on there. I absolutely love the MC12. I stand by this car. This is probably my favourite handling car here today. Between this and the Aventador, it's a big, big sort of decision, but yeah, the Maserati was superb. And because the GTR was a little bit understeering, I wanted to give Nissan fans more of a chance. Here's a Nissan R390 GT1. This has 550 horsepower and weighs 2,264 pounds. Now, this car comes from the 90s GT1 racing category, where basically if you made something somewhat road legal, you could get it to race. And the R390 was one of those cars that came out, along with the Toyota GT1 road car, but we don't have that in Forza. Now, this car to drive is absolutely terrifying, as you can probably imagine. It is the lightest thing here today by about, I think it's £1,000 lighter than pretty much the lightest thing here today. So the R390 is very light. It's not got that much power, but it's seriously quick in a straight line. My biggest complaint with this car was the fact that it's very unsettled. It's very easy to get this thing sideways and to crash in it. And the other problem I had was the dashboard. Now, this sounds weird, but the rev counter on the side of the screen, I don't usually use that because I don't have a chance to look over there because I'm concentrating on the road. So I use the rev counter the car has. Now, on this, it revs to 11,000, the rev counter does, but the actual car will only rev to 8,000, which meant it was very strange. Anyway, the Nissan R390, unsurprisingly, was the fastest car of the day, 113.481. That car was 100 PI over everything else here today, so no surprise there. Maserati MC12 goes into fourth with a 115.531, and the Lamborghini Aventador is quick behind it with a 115.560. They're insanely quick times. Ridiculously quick times. I can't imagine they're going to get beaten by any A-class cars anytime soon. The MP4-12C goes into 7th with a 1:16.318, which is a very, very fast time, and that's 1 second quicker than the Ferrari 458, a 1:17.367. To say last time that car was round, it set like a 1:20. The 458 was definitely a big improvement, but out of those two, that McLaren is so much better. Moving down the board, the Audi R8 V10 Plus gets a 1:18.137. That car isn't particularly nice to drive, so that's why it's there. Although it is quicker than a 430 Scuderia, so I guess that's some silver lining of some description. And unfortunately, the slowest car of the day was the Nissan GTR Black, 1:18.342. Yeah, I'm sorry, that car just has some understeer. Please don't kill me. But it's still faster than a 430 Scuderia and a KTM Expo. So I guess, again, it's a silver lining of some description. Anyway, on to what these cars actually set in real life. The MC12 did a 1:18.9. We got it round in 1:15.5. Aventador 1:16.5 in real life. Game time 1:15.6. The McLaren defeats me slightly. It did a real time of 1:16.2. Game time 1:16.3. Ferrari 458 1:19.1 in real life. 1:17.4 in game time. And I think the GTR was slightly quicker in real life as well. Anyway, I want to thank you all very much for watching. My name's been TheRealEmile. Next time round, I think we're doing American cars. So, yeah, that should be fun. Anyway, I want to thank you all very much for watching. My name's been TheRealEmile, and until next time, farewell.